I'm going to spend a little bit of time providing just a particular framework on our system and your work here, make a few recommendations, and then I'll get out your face for a while, and then you'll be able to ask me questions or challenge me, give me an opportunity to tell you what I have no idea about, so I'll say stuff like I don't know. And then that'll pretty much cover my time with you all. I'm originally from Oakland, California, born and raised there. My family came out with the Great Migration in the 1940s, and so I was raised very old school. Right? So my perspective is really rooted in a working class background. Also, I tend to get hyper. It doesn't seem like it now, but I get really hyper. So if you start to hear me raise my voice or get excited, it's not me yelling at you. It's that I get passionate about our work, and my background is from people who talk loud. Okay, and it's Oakland, it's East Bay, so it's Italians, it's Portuguese, it's Jewish folks, it's Asian Americans, it's Latino Americans, black folks, and everybody speaks loud, okay? Everybody. So you grow up like that. But also I get really passionate because of my career. I'm an educator, right? And my background is in youth development and K-12 work. I taught for 10 years at my alma mater of Oakland Tech High School, which is home of Huey P. Newton, Marshawn Lynch, Clint Eastwood, the Pointer Sisters, etc. All those folks. Ricky Henderson, if you know baseball at all those folks. And my mama went there. So that's really important. I was one of 12 folks in my family to go to that school, right? So I'm old school. But after college, I actually went back and I taught there for a decade. And I taught a humanities class, which was an elective that became a pretty large program. I taught 170 students a year, every year, roughly. I think we hit 170 in my third year, so maybe 7 out of those 10. And I taught critical theory, feminist theory, globalization, history of social movements to grades 9 through 12 for that decade. And then later after that, I was asked to become the co-principal of the June Jordan School for Equity in San Francisco, so I did that for a little while before getting sick and finding my way out of direct service into the very exciting world of California Community College policy. If that sounds really entertaining to you, then that's a really special person that you are. So I got to do that for a few years, working with the Career Ladders Project, Learning Works, and 3CSN, if any of you are familiar with the California Community College Success Network. Am I right on that? With Deborah Harrington. So did work with those folks for a while, and then somebody made the crazy decision to hire me as assistant professor of educational leadership at University of San Francisco, where I'm a professor now. All right, so that's kind of the trajectory. During that time, I got a chance to be an adjunct through all those years. I was an adjunct freeway flyer between Laney College in Oakland and De Anza College in Cupertino. You think about the Bay, that's about an hour drive. Okay, if you add some traffic to it, it means that I had to take my motorcycle. So when I would do the freeway flying, I'd literally be flying on a motorcycle, weaving in and out of traffic. It's legal. It's legal in the state of California, by the way. Lane splitting is legal in the state of California. So doing that to get to my class. So I got a chance to experience that adjunct world for about 4 years, which was interesting. And I also got a chance to teach at Santa Rita County Jail in Alameda County for a while in maximum security. And I also I was honored to be able to teach at San Quentin State Prison as well for a while with the No More Tears Project with some very good men, and some not so good men as well, because it was San Quentin. So, all right, all right. So that's kind of a loose description of my career background. When I mentioned this idea of what I taught at the high school level, and then it was similar to things that I did as a principal, I still do that in the teaching of graduate students. So I'm in the School of Ed, so unfortunately at USF I don't get to teach undergrads, which I would really enjoy, but I teach in a master's and doctoral program for folks getting their degree in administrative leadership. and I train school principals for their administrative credential, right? So in that, the critical theory in social justice is kind of, when you combine it with my background, being from Oakland and being what Oakland is, and some of you are very familiar with that, and Oakland's connection to Compton and South Central LA, and all of our beautiful sister and brother cities of Richmond and Vallejo, and Riverside in many ways, and all these different locations around the country. I come from a very politicized background. Okay, so that's going to come through in this talk very clearly. Okay, I'm unapologetically leaning further past liberal to the left, which means I'm going to be critical of conservative viewpoints, but I'm also going to be critical of liberal viewpoints. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I'm not liberal. I'm past that. So I have something bad to say about everybody, essentially, right? Okay, which is befitting. I'm just being transparent about it. I know that there is a solid effort that folks make to be neutral, which is really cool, and I really honor that. I think that's really cool. But in education, it's literally impossible. You cannot be neutral in education, in my opinion. We'll talk about kind of why that is. Okay. So anyhow, when I raise my voice, when my face wrinkles up, okay, I'm not angry at you. Okay, I'm black, and I'm supposed to be angry, so I am. Okay, my dad used to always say, if you ain't angry and you're black, you ain't paying attention. Like, what's wrong with you, right? You only represent 13% of the population, and you 40-some% of the prison population. It's been that way since they started taking count, right? You always at the bottom of the employment list. You're always at the bottom of the college acceptance list. You're already unfairly targeted by law enforcement. You're most likely, or one of the groups most likely to be homeless, right? And it's been that way for quite a while. And you're the descendants of folks who were stolen and annihilated and enslaved to create the the earliest boom of wealth in the United States. And then as if your ancestors created the wealth, all the policies were in place for you not to have access to the wealth. And now people have the nerve to turn around and talk about your academic failure is the fault of the family, not the actual institution that existed forever. So I should be angry, right? And as a person that did K-12 work in youth development, and you see how people of all ethnic groups that are low income are treated, I don't know how I'd be able to stay in the education field if I wasn't angry. So when you see that come through, sometimes when I've been at now, I don't know how many community colleges I've worked with recently in the last few years. It's around 20 out of the 100 and we're at 113 now since they added Clovis, right? So about 20. But sometimes you get faculty and they'll say, why was he yelling? All right, and I like to remind folks that they're not accustomed to black men yelling at them, but I'm yelling because I'm angry. And you should be too. You don't have to yell about it, but that's how I choose to deal with it. It's part of my therapy. Okay? All right. But remember, I'm not yelling at you. Does that make sense? Yes? Yes? Okay. All right, cool. All right, so I'll talk about a few things here. And first, this is very basic stuff, but I was just at another college recently. I didn't mention some of the policy stuff. So I did some work with the Strengthening Student Success Conference and Bob Greener and all those good folks. And I was honored to do a lot of work in the Central Valley with the C6 initiative with their TAA grant. They got like $19 million a few years ago. And I was honored to be able to work with Carol Goldsmith out of West Hills College and do that work. And so I've been involved in a lot of this community college equity stuff just only for the past 5 years or so. Okay. But my interest in equity predates the community college's rather tardy interest in equity. Okay. So, and I say tardy, I mean you hella late. You got like 2 million people in your system. Over 1 million of them are people of color, and you just decided to discuss completion all of a sudden. Right? Which is very strange because what type of educational institution decides to not discuss completion? Right? And then you need all these initiatives for people to discuss the actual finishing of a school, which is really weird because that makes you like the only location in schooling that hasn't discussed completion as a collective for like 3 decades. Like high schools discuss who's graduating. 4-year universities discuss who's graduating. It doesn't that feel weird? Like, that kind of tripped me out. They're like, oh, we're going to launch an initiative for completion and equity. But you have all the people of color and the low-income people, and they need to complete the most. So I don't know what you've been doing. Not you, but I don't know what the system's been doing all this time. And partially, too, there's kind of like this concern. Like, if you weren't serving who you were serving, would you have been discussing completion earlier? Which is a whole nother thing. But I'll get into that. Okay. So we want to distinguish between diversity and equity. I always like to remind folks that diversity is just literally having different elements in one spot. That's all that is. Right? You're already diverse. Jails are diverse. You go to prison, they're super diverse. I don't know how much into success they are, but there's a whole bunch of different people there. Okay? Buses are diverse. Trains are diverse, right? But that's not any indicator of any particular intentionality. Right? It's just people there. So we never want to confuse diversity with equity, because those two are not nearly the same. One is just throwing some people in a spot. The other is completely different. The other is about justice. And this is the difficult one. See? In the tradition of critical theory, we want to remember that if we're acknowledging some form of dehumanization, if we're acknowledging the need for some form of humanization, doing something good, then we have to acknowledge all the things that make that difficult. So if we're going to launch ourselves on a pursuit of equity, we have to first acknowledge inequity. Does that make sense? Okay? And we also want to note that if we're going to look towards justice, okay, then justice is not something that the institution gets to determine. That's another thing. See, diversity, equality, these are ideas that are easier for institutions to determine based on usually numerical indicators, right? You can compare your population with the population of the county and say, yeah, we're adequately diverse. You can look at how available resources that you provide are to different communities and say, yes, we're providing equal access, right? But justice is usually in the eyes of the beholder. Meaning that I get to determine whether or not justice is being served as well as you do. Does that make sense? So student voice, faculty voice, classified voice, all come together to discussing whether or not an institution is just or not, which makes the challenge incredibly difficult for a system that hasn't really thought about even students completing for 30 years. It's going to be tough to get to justice. Because what that means is possibly the inadequacy of the institution has been normalized as basic institutional culture. The lack of success of students, the lack of talent in hiring, the lack of different perspectives and voices, all that becomes normalized. Is just the normal activity of an institution when they have no clear goal and vision for 30 years. Am I making any sense? Okay, you should see the looks on your faces. You're staring at me like I'm talking Japanese, which is cool because that was my foreign language. So anyhow, so as we think about the context and your president so beautifully mentioned this shift of community colleges moving from like open access into this kind of pay-to-play institution, which was actually a huge deal. And I'll frame that really quickly. Okay, and Claire, if you keep me on time so I don't go over. Thank you. So, California Master Plan for Education. This is what makes the California community colleges so special, okay? It had two main interests here. One, the differentiation of the functions among the different post-secondary institutions. So that's CC, CSU, and UC, okay? To differentiate what each of them do. For those of you that haven't been in California long, you'll go to UC, you'll notice that it's hard to become an electrician at Cal, right? You go to USC, not a lot of plumbing students, okay? They're all at the community college, right? And not a lot of these for-profit colleges have tried to snake away a lot of our students, but you know, I don't get too mad at them. I'm super critical of for-profit colleges, but I also know that they wouldn't have an opportunity if our community college system didn't fail students. Okay, so it's kind of a double-edged sword. Like, I don't like them, but I also know they snaked in on an opportunity. Okay, so anyhow, giving them different purposes, right? And those purposes have kind of shifted, and they're shifting even more now as certain community colleges want to start offering bachelor's degrees, which I think is a great idea. CSUs won a lawsuit in the early 2000s against the UC to be able to provide doctorates, right? To kind of take that that privilege away from UC. So some of these roles have been shifting, but that's one of the first intentions of the document. Bless you. And then number two, the establishment of the principle of, what's that say, of what? Universal access and choice. Okay, super, super radical in the United States. Okay, universal access and choice means that we're going to give even the poorest of the poor, okay, an opportunity to one day be at Harvard. Systemically. Okay? Systemically. Not just their gut, not just their drive, their desire. Literally, we're going to provide a system that a cat that was gangbanging last year can decide, I want to go to Harvard, go down the street to the community college, work their butts off, and transfer one day into Harvard. Okay, it's a great idea. Centered in the ethics of American democracy and freedom. I feel like waving a flag right now, okay? Because I truly believe it's one of those things that truly reflects the dream of America, right? Which of course then is going to make it incredibly dangerous to a lot of people. Y'all following me here? Okay? If you're not, we'll talk about it. So UC CSU. UC was to select the top 12.5%. CSU is going to take the top third. And California Community College. Now here's where your role comes in. The California community colleges were to admit who?
The top 100%.
Any student capable. Do you see this? Hello? Any student capable of benefiting from instruction. Okay. I'll come back to this later, but the catch is, how do you have an entire system serving 2 million people now that actually is going to need to have the best teaching skills out of all three systems, and you never train them to teach? That's an inherent flaw in the system. Okay? That it's going to be really hard to get that much better when, one, many of the folks you hire have never taught, and that's okay. Okay? But secondly, you don't have a real institutionalized system in place to turn them into teachers. Okay? So people, y'all know, I know how it is. Welcome. Welcome to university. Maybe you get to share an office. I don't know. But here's your classes. Good luck. And you're like, yo, I'm a professor, right? And then you walk in and it's like staring at you, and you're like, okay, so I guess we're gonna open a book. That's what we're gonna do. Yeah, my name's Darrick, and yeah, all right, let's go. Okay, it's a beautiful thing because you're giving people an opportunity to experience the magnificent art of teaching, but it's gonna be problematic if your mission is to admit any student capable of benefiting from instruction. That means you're going to get everybody. Everybody. Okay? And most higher ed professors don't know how to teach. And I don't mean that like they can't teach. I mean, you're not hired at Cal State University. You're not hired in the UC system because you're a good teacher. You're hired to do research. Okay, that's the edict of those of us with doctorates. Hey, welcome, study people, and you'll have some classes. You know what I'm saying? Like that, right? But community college it's an instructional institution. So automatically, what I'm trying to do is draw attention away from a narrative that says you're not doing well as individuals, because that's not what I'm saying. Are you hearing me? Hello? That's not what I'm saying, okay? I'm saying you're in an institution that has serious flaws that do not match up with its actual goal at this time. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. All right. So Why did I say it's dangerous? These are pictures. Some of you might recognize these pictures, okay? But these are pictures from the 1968 Democratic Convention in Chicago. That's our democracy at work, on display to the world in the early years of the Cold War. All right? Now, why would I bring this up? Well, because the California Master Plan and all this stuff I was showing to you, okay, this stuff was, the California Master Plan was ratified in 1960. Right? So you have these things developing, our institution developing at a very tumultuous time. Mainly a time when there's a lot of class conflict, there's racial conflict that's been continuing for the entirety of the United States history, but you have a lot of conflict happening. And what's going on here is that there's this upheaval against the Vietnam War, there's upheaval against student rights, against human rights, and etc. And at the Democratic Convention, people have televisions at this time, and folks are actually watching, okay, these conflicts and these clashes all over the world where they have TVs, and they're seeing that there's a problem in paradise, okay? Now, certain folks then are representing this problem, right? And to us, those of us that are in the communities, we see these folks as our heroes, all right? But these folks, to others that are perhaps a little bit more conservative in their views, they are viewing these folks as a threat to the security of the United States. Are you following me so far? Okay. So you got Fannie Lou Hamer, Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. Y'all should know who that is, yes? Caesar Chavez, yes?
Yes.
Okay, word, represent, right? Caesar Chavez, right? You have community colleges, Merritt College folks organizing for ethnic studies. You have the Black Panthers coming out of Oakland, spread throughout the country, right? You have Carlos Montez down here, the Brown Berets. You got Kathleen Cleaver, the Black Panthers. You got the Ewar Kuhn, one of the Asian American resistance groups in the Bay Area at the time. You have all these folks doing this work, okay? And I don't even have, you got the Young Lords, a Puerto Rican group out of Chicago and New York. And so you have all these groups, okay? And I don't have pictures of the Young Patriots. I don't have pictures of the Students' Democratic Society. I don't have pictures of any of the white groups that also were a part of this. So excuse the omission, but they were there. Are y'all following me? Mm-hmm. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So when you end up with all this activity on American soil, activity, right? Some people it becomes a problem. It's a major problem. This is, you recognize this handsome gentleman. This is the former Vice President of the United States, Spiro Agnew. And the construction here, and this is out of H. Bruce Franklin's book. In early 1970, Spiro Agnew argued that there was too high a percentage of black students in college and condemned, quote, the violence emanating from black what? Can you say that louder, please? Black? Okay, this is very important, okay? This was at an Iowa Republican fundraiser that he made these comments. Declaring that college at one time considered a privilege is considered to be a right today. He singled out open admissions as one of the main ways, quote, by which unqualified students are being swept into the college on the wave of the new socialism. Okay? Why is this important? Black student militancy, the idea of student uprisings, okay? And what it effectively did, these notions, was linking these uprisings and these issues when communities were calling out governments and other institutions to get their rights, and some folks saying we're going to take a self-defense approach to these struggles. They were linking the existence of these uprisings to the existence of open admission access, largely to community colleges. Okay? Now, if you recall, if you think about this, some of this activity was directly linked to community colleges, meaning that folks went to school and they read something. Okay? And they said, wow, I didn't learn this in high school. What this is saying is that we have certain rights. There is a certain precedent for people fighting for their rights, just like my mama told me, just like my grandparents told me. And now not only do I have the awareness, I have strategies. I have a sophisticated understanding of class relationships, of economic and power relationships that I can share to people. right? So for example, in Oakland, you get the Black Panther Party, those folks were going to Oakland City College, right? So you come out of Oakland City College and you start your own political education program for your own community. So you're actually translating this information from your experience at the community college out to your own community members. It's a politicization process, okay? So the link does make sense, okay? The link does make sense. But in that link, it is declared as a threat. Are y'all following this so far? Okay, why would I bring this up? Because this should contextualize your work. You work in a threatening institution. It should also explain why you can go silent for 30 years on issues of equity. Could also explain perhaps your woeful funding. For years, the California community colleges had a lower per pupil expenditure than K-12. Right? So when we find ourselves in this position, like, why aren't we better? Why aren't we better? There is a political context to it, right? Later that year, this is also 1970, an advisor to Nixon and Reagan when he was president here, defined quite precisely the target of the conservative counterattack. Quote, "We are in danger of producing an educated proletariat." Proletariat means what?
Workers.
That's right, working class people, right? We're in danger. That's dynamite, and that it's not Good Times JJ dynamite. See, y'all got that joke. When I said it to the students, they was like, JJ, who are you talking? Is that your friend, right? You know, and so, but thank you. See, that's why I like talking to faculty, and y'all get the joke, right? All right, so not JJ dynamite, bad dynamite, right? Actual dynamite, okay? And he said, we have to be selective on who we allow to go through higher education, okay? Now, remember, the community college system, by design, flies in the face of this notion of being selective. It is to offer universal access and admit all who may benefit from instruction. That very notion goes against the idea of being selective on who goes through the higher ed process. So your system sits in direct contradiction to a particular political ideology. That's why I said it's very difficult to be neutral in education. Either you are working towards the full assimilation and the maintenance of an unequal social stratification structure, or you are looking to balance out that structure and give people an opportunity who otherwise would not have one. It's very hard to be neutral, okay? I don't suggest that everybody has the same view on life or that everyone has the same politics. And I'll give you a simple example. My high school program when I taught for 10 years, I told you, I taught feminist theory for 2 months out of the school year. My students were analyzing what Frantz Fanon might call a psychosis, but they were analyzing like the psychosis of masculinity, for example. Why men are crazy, essentially, right? They were studying the tactics that pimps use to procure potential prostitutes, because the average age for entering into prostitution in the United States is 14. So my high schoolers should know how to avoid a pimp, right? That's not normal textbook stuff, right? They're studying oppression, sub-oppressor, and having a sub-oppressor consciousness and adhesion and prescription and all these different things, grades 9 through 12, okay? That's what I'm teaching at the high school level. Are y'all following this? My number one funder was a Republican. Brian Rogers, great man, okay? Funded me every year. Why? Because he was a former teacher. He walked into my class and he was like, "What are these kids reading?" And I gave him the reader. Our reader was 400 pages. And I said, "This is what they're reading. Go ahead and flip through." He's like, "This is deep stuff." And they're into it. I said, "Yeah, they like it. They like it a little bit. We mix in some hip hop. We do some flavorful stuff. But they like it." And he was like, oh yeah, I want to support this." I said, "Really? I thought you was, I thought you was on the right." You know what I mean? And his thing was, I know good education when I see it, right? So I'm not suggesting that everyone has to adopt a particular politic, okay? What I'm suggesting is something different, right? That we go deeper. Why the hell are we doing this in the first place as a human being? Regardless of your politics, what are you here to do? Education, educe, is to bring out. It's not to put in. It's not called education. It's called education. We're bringing something out of a person and matching it with the frameworks we have to provide in our disciplines. That's what we do. That's what we do. Educe. In order to bring something out, we have to assume that something valuable is already there. Okay? So if we have a politic that assumes that certain people are automatically less valuable than others, it's actually in direct contradiction to our profession as educators. Right? So I'm not trying to shift you into a political frame. I'm trying to actually get you to entertain the idea that you actually, as a participant in this college, have a much greater purpose than just teaching people a subject or helping them matriculate through the system. It's a much greater purpose. And certain folks identify that purpose when they get out of bed as problematic. If you identify it as neutral, then you're going to lose. Okay, so anyhow. So after such comments and such a perspective, it was at the Nixon administration that decisions like the Crime and Safe Streets Act began to influence how the United States began to allocate money for incarceration and law enforcement versus education. And you can see from 1970 roughly all the way past 95 into 2006, we went, of course, from 200,000 people in prison to 2.6 million, right? And in that, the percentage, the ethnic percentages stayed the same. Right? So when folks go, aren't things getting better? I'll be like, I guess so, sure. I mean, I think things are getting better. People are fighting every day, so I hope some would be getting better, right? I think things are getting better. But yeah, in 1970, you had about 90,000 people who were African American in prison. And by 2006, you had 980,000. Right? The percentage stayed roughly the same, even though the numbers increased, right? So anyway, I'm not going to stay on this for long, but is this making sense so far?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I'm not going to stay there. I'll skip some of this stuff, but point is that there's problems with sending people to prison. I think you get that. Okay. So, again, as you had this flow going up, still, in California in 1987, there is an addendum to the Master Plan for Higher Education. 87. Not 97, not 2007. 87. Jerry curls, pink, like, leg warmers, big hair. 87. Are y'all following me here? Yes? Okay, okay. Think how far back that was, okay? And so, what do they say in 87? Educational equity in 87 goes beyond the legal guarantee of access to education, okay? This is the shift from we're working on equal access to a shift to justice. Are y'all following this? In 87, okay? It is an environment of fairness and responsiveness necessary for each person to fully reach his or her educational potential. Okay? So when you have this addendum to the California Master Plan, you should expect in 87 the movement that you see now. Are y'all following this? Okay? But for a variety of reasons, not one person's reason, that didn't happen. But we will not succeed as a society unless there is a commitment by the state and our educational institutions to equip all people to fully participate in and contribute to the growth of our social institutions. That's a very nice way of putting it. I'm going to advocate that you take it a step further, but you get the gist. Yes? Mm-hmm. Hello?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. So this is what I wanted to focus on a bit, and then I'll be done with you all. How much time I got? I'm trying to look here. Okay, cool. So let me do this quickly. So this is where we're getting at. Thank you for being patient through this so far. So this is where we're getting at, okay? The most important lesson to be learned from past failures is that programs to achieve equity cannot be treated as the responsibility of just another group or office. Right? Something your president was mentioning, bringing back the Puente, the strength of the Puente program, offering these programs as part of the institution, part of the budget, line item on a regular basis, right? You're institutionalizing it. And institutional barriers such as faculty and administrator attitudes, and this is what I want to talk about, if that's all right, okay? Faculty and administrator attitudes, differential treatment, discriminatory curricula, and indifference must be addressed. Okay? I worked at a college that was recently in danger of losing its accreditation. It's a big college here in California. Okay? And I was on a research team. It was me, my partner. Some of you guys might even know Luis Chavez, but great guy. Okay, me and Luis were working together, and we were interviewing 50 faculty and administrators at this college on why they struggle with matriculating students through to graduation. We were partnered with another organization that did focus groups of students, and then we were partnered with Stanford to do another piece of the research. So as a group of 3 different entities, we all put together, we're working to put together this report for this college, and then we found out they were being put on show cause in the middle of the work, right? And so you can actually Google this. I think they might have took it down. It was a hard day for me, okay? And a year after we finished the report and submitted it to folks so they could look at it, a year later, they asked me to come and share the results of our portion to the whole faculty. So you know that all faculty, PD day, flex day, people were sitting in a room about 4 times as large as this, and then they had it on TV, right? You could stream it, right, in other locations around the campus. And they had just got through booing the president. When I mean just got through. I mean that the lovely person that introduced me, her name is Tracy, great, strong educator. She didn't even wait till the boos stopped. They were like, boo, boo, you suck, we hate you, you liar, right? To the president, okay? And as they're booing, she goes, and now we're gonna have she has a yell. Now we're gonna have our speaker, Darrick Smith. Come on up, Darrick. And they're like, boo, you suck, right? So I had to come up on stage. They were still booing, and I had like a PowerPoint. Like I'm using a PowerPoint today. I don't usually like using them, but I was like, I have a PowerPoint of our research findings for our portion of the project. But they were still screaming at me, and they didn't even know me. So I'm like, you're screaming at me just because I'm up here, which was fine. I get it. And so I said, I'm not even going to use the PowerPoint. We're just going to talk. And what I was trying to address was these pieces here. At this particular location that I was at, there was bullying, racism, preferential treatment to certain staff and faculty over another. The faculty had no one to supervise them at all. The deans were like gophers for the faculty. So where like they had a power structure that was totally just out of whack in terms of serving students. I mean, you could look on their meetings in public, the public meetings online, and people were telling us, shut up in the meeting. Right? And they were worried about accreditation. And so I told them, after I went through all the things that we had learned that was problematic, I said, you can get accreditation. That's not going to be your problem. You've had these problems for generations now. And you've had accreditation, right? So accreditation is not your issue as educators. As an institution, it could be your primary concern, your urgent concern, but that's not your issue. You will be able to get accreditation and leave all these issues in place. Because accreditation is about compliance to a particular set of standards, not how well you educate students. Those 2 things are separate. And it's not about how well you even enjoy your job. I've done accreditation. I've led accreditation, and it's really hard at the K-12 level. And we just went through it at my university. You get everybody together, it's a tremendous thing, and people are working, and they're submitting, and they're getting interviewed, and everybody's like, yeah, they got the right answers. You're like, thank God we passed that, okay? Okay, like, oh, it's over, right? But that's not necessarily a reflection of the culture of your institution, okay? And sure enough, they were able to kind of make it through the accreditation scare, but they still have a lot of the same issues. So these issues are actually key because these cultural issues are what students have to touch. Okay? A lot of the processes we go through can make things slower or faster behind the scenes, but what students have contact with is this. Attitudes, differential treatment, discriminatory curriculum, that's what they have contact with. Okay? And so when we think about, Obama, okay, I think he's so handsome, right? Goodness gracious, right? I mean, yeah, it's just, the brother's smooth. I have like, my mom, I've like plastered like the house. Obama's like he's Jesus, you know what I mean? It's like, Obama's everywhere. It used to be Clinton, strangely enough. Like, oh my God, Melania thinks he's so fine. And then Obama's like, oh my God, you know what I mean? Anyway, I guess that's how you become president. Okay, so anyhow, so I have him up because our great shift towards equity largely occurred on his initial watch. Right? As the economy kind of began to collapse in 2008, people lost their jobs. It was a major problem. Folks were out of work, needing to find new careers. It was just a mess. And America found itself literally with no institution in existence that could actually rewrite the ship in a quick manner, meaning re-educate folks that are not 18. Are you following this? Okay. So the only spot you had was this thing that you never really thought about much called the community colleges. Because that's the only place that you can go to without having to have a certain GPA, right? And you can just kind of hop in and out. You know what I mean? Like, no deep commitment. You kind of get in there, get out of there, right? And then what they looked at and what they found was like, oh my goodness, these things that have to save the country actually aren't very good. That was the scare. You looked up and you saw, for example, in a state like California with 38 million people in it, about the size of Canada's population, okay, that our success rates were largely at the 50% mark at its best for the most successful populations. Okay? That's not going to cut it. By the way, and the ill part, it was that, sorry, I'm using a lot of slang, black vernacular, but I hope you can follow me here. Right. The crazy part was that there wasn't even a clear definition for completion in these places. You have certificates, you have AAs, you have transfer, and then you got everybody else. And we wasn't sure, like, how many do you complete? Well, I don't know. We get people through. Who? How? When? Well, they get through. Okay, cool. Well, you're a 2-year institution. This is from 2012. This is the scorecard, and I'm going to tell you there's some problems with the scorecard, okay? Not your scorecard. I mean, there's problems with your scorecard, but there's problems with the measurement of the scorecard as well. Y'all follow me? Okay, so there's 2 problems there, okay? So don't fret too much of the numbers, but your numbers in 2012 was a little low. Okay, a little low, but that's okay. So let me get to this problem. So one of the problems with the measurement itself is that we're so, as a system, we struggle so much that these numbers, 62% of people who come in prepared, meaning that these are folks that did not have to go through developmental courses, right? Non-basic skills folks. Y'all follow me? Yep. Okay. These are the folks who come in, quote, unprepared, which folks have to take basic skills. You see the dramatic drop off. Mm-hmm. Yes? Okay, and this is the average of those 2 essentially overall. Are y'all following that? Yeah. Okay, cool. Here's the problem with this, okay? This is the methodology they use is that they track a cohort for 6 years. Did you hear what I said? 6. 6. I said 6. That's what I said. 6. Okay, like you pay to go to UCLA, they're not tracking their graduation rates on a 12-year scale. Yes? Because that would be bad for UCLA to say, well, I know you want to be here 4. But we really track you on a 12-year. You'd be like, 12 years? That's a good portion of my life. Community colleges supposedly have a 2-year plan for students. But because of the lack of resources and all these other things over the years, we end up having to gauge our success on a level that is 3 times the original completion rate. Now, if you're trying to turn around an economy quicker, this is probably not the best measurement to use, but this is where we're at with our scorecards, okay? So this is 2012. And then the 2014, if you can see the difference between here. Do you see this? Okay. We have an increase in your ability to matriculate through your prepared students. And we have a decrease in unprepared. This is 12 to 14. Y'all following this? Okay. Now, again, this is not... to me, it's scary, but it's not scary in a way that's unique to West Los Angeles, right? This is a systemic trend. Are y'all following this? Okay, cool. And so what you end up with here is that we're still struggling, and when you have unprepared students, and I was talking to Claire, Professor Norris, just the other day about this, that it puts a lot of pressure on your English and math departments. Okay? Because ever since the Poppy Copy, the Basic Skills Initiative was developed for our system, trying to get students. Do you guys know about that, the Poppy Copy, Basic Skills? All right, so some years ago, there's a lot of money. I think it was over like $112, $120 million or so spent on trying to improve basic skills completion rates. And we improved it after spending all that money by 1%. So meaning that we didn't improve it, is the point, okay? After spending all that money, okay? So then they did Poppy Copy 2, which was led by Barbara Lowski just like 2 years ago, right? To try and improve the basic skills. Because the log jam to our completion is in students that test into basic skills. Are y'all following this? And so it's an incredible struggle because we have about 80 to 85% of community college students that test into that. Are y'all following this? Strange. And by the way, University of California has 50% of their students that have to go through remediation. Right? So it's not that we have 80 to 85% and no one else has it, right? It's a K-12 problem. You know what I'm saying? All right? So it's not just a K-12 problem. It's more than that, but it starts there. Okay, so let me move through this quickly. This is Merritt College in Oakland. They have a similar demographic to you. You can see their numbers are similarly low. Yes? Okay. You can see Santa Barbara that has a completely different demographic than you. Their numbers are significantly higher. You following this? Okay. You have San Joaquin Delta College, which actually has more low-income students of color attending. Excuse me, that's not true. Their students are lower income than Oakland students. Okay, yet they perform significantly better. Okay. A lot of this has to do with their student support programs, their faculty development process, the way in which their college functions and interacts with community resources as well, but there's a lot of reasons for that. So there's a report out of UCLA's Civil Rights Project that kind of couched the problem pretty simply. It's an Unrealized Promises report. I think it came out in 2010. It might have been 2012. But what they basically did was looked at the community colleges in Southern California, right, the LA Community College District and others, and looked at the success rates of the colleges and compared them to the success rates of their feeding school districts. And what they basically found was that the students that came from weaker high schools, weaker meaning schools that do not matriculate students through the high school level very well, are concentrated in community colleges where Black and Latino students are overrepresented. So you have poor performing schools, all right, sending students of color that were in poor performing schools into community colleges that then become considered low performing community colleges. Are you following that? Okay? Students from strong high schools are concentrated in community colleges where white and Asian students are overrepresented. Okay? So what you end up with is students that are performing well and representing a particular ethnic background are going in the particular community colleges, and then those community colleges are considered successful community colleges. Are you following this? Okay? And the community colleges with the highest transfer rates are majority white or majority white Asian. And most of the lowest transfer rate community colleges are majority underrepresented minority or intensely segregated. Okay? This is not a study that is saying that if you have Black students or if you have Latino students, they can't perform. It's actually a study saying that we don't know how good community colleges are, and we actually don't know how bad community colleges are because they are performing at the level of the students that they get from the previous institutions. Are you following this? So if you don't have to deal with students that came from a bad K-12 experience and you're waving your flag about how great your college is, I don't know how great your college is. Because I don't know how hard you had to teach. I don't know what you had to do. You got students that were trained to be students in a particular way that fits your campus. But I don't know if that makes you great. Does that make any sense? Okay? It certainly doesn't make the students bad, though. Are you hearing me? Okay? See, education for me, and who the hell am I? I'm just a guy, okay? But education for me is about working with who's in front of me. And regardless of how they came in, my job is to get them to a certain point. Okay? And at the community college level, if they came in, it's not compulsory education. So if they came in, they paid and took 3 buses to get here. So for folks to discuss their students as well, they don't have any motivation, they don't have no hope, that's a lie. They showed up and they paid. Where I'm from, you don't pay or show up to something you don't care about. All right? Why would I do that? Okay? And what we end up with is seeing a different dynamic. That when students, and this is from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Their Whole Lives Ahead of Them report, where they looked at students and dropout. And they found that most students that drop out of school have thought about going back. That lot of thought here, some thought here. The majority of folks who drop out consider going back and say that work and family are the major reasons why they're not going. It's not because it's boring. Where's the boring stuff? I don't think any college will accept me is down here. No school near me seems to have a program that I'm really interested in. All right. The number 1 and 2 reasons is I have to work and I have to deal with my family. That is not about their interests. That's not about their capacity. That's not about what are their family values, education. That has nothing to do with that. The number 1 and 2 reasons are economic in nature. Are you following this? Okay, so are you guys okay? I'm almost done. You all right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. And having to work is the top reason young adults give for why they left school in the first place. Those who did not complete had trouble balancing work and school in their first year of higher education. Okay? So again, we don't want to think in terms of that our students have some inherent deficiency. Instead, I'd rather draw attention to the fact that the institution has an inherent deficiency. Because it actually makes more sense. Okay? A student is a student. They sign up, they pay, they show up. Okay? They show up for as long as they can. That's their job. Mission accomplished. I have a system that hires people for their content knowledge, yet it's supposed to somehow teach a diverse population to go through a system that has historically mistreated them, and they don't have nearly enough training or the support structures to make that happen. So why on earth would I blame the student who's being a student when the instructors in the administration are not actually adequate for the task? Again, not the individual's fault. Systemic. You following us? Okay? And by the way, I'm not saying you're not good at your job. I want to be very clear about that because I don't know you. You follow me? So that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying you're failing because I don't know you like that. I believe you're probably doing a great job, which is why you're here this morning. Yes? Okay? But we do want to acknowledge that even as you as an individual might be doing a good job, you know that you are not the norm in many spaces. Are you following us? Okay? Not all, but many. Sometimes you'd be like, damn, they're awful. I mean, I'm not going to say nothing because I don't want to be, mean. But I don't know how they teach at all. Right? Okay, so anyhow. I'll go through all that. So here's your situation, West LA. Kaiser Permanente Hospitals did a community assessment report, 2013, in order to prepare for some of the policy initiatives that they were going to push. 2015, the Los Angeles Homeless Service Authority also found that the number of homeless people in Los Angeles County rose 12% in the past 2 years. This is your situation. Okay, sorry I didn't preface that. This is your situation. Okay, when I work with community colleges and they say we're interested in data, and they're only looking at academic data, I know they're going to mess up. You're called a community college, so you serve the community. So you need to know more than academic data. You need to have community data. And folks always ask me, well, where do you get that from? Start with county health reports. Okay? County health reports can serve 2 purposes. 1, helps you structure the resources you provide for your students. And 2, helps you structure your classes. Okay, which how much time I got, Claire? Like 5 minutes or something? Okay, so I'll get to that. Health issues. You have a large homicide rate in West Los Angeles when compared to the rest of the county. Okay, 13.7% when compared to the rest of the county. You have asthma hospitalizations that are incredible. I have asthma, so it's always a big deal to me, asthma. Usually a result of environmental issues, okay? And there's a list of other things as well. Alcohol and drug-induced mental disease hospitalizations. You can see in the West Los Angeles service area, in comparison to the rest of LA County, 480 hospitalizations per 100,000 compared to your county average of 109. Okay? So you have serious issues in this area. Okay? Again, very hard to be neutral as an educator, right? These are the issues, some of the issues your students are facing. So your question is, how as a classified staff person and how as a faculty member am I operating with the understanding of my true context? Okay? Not what I dream it to be. Okay? What is my actual context and how am I preparing myself and what are the systems in place to execute a plan that addresses that context? Okay? All right, so what does that look like? And I'll go through this relatively quickly. These are two categories I try to get into when I'm working with faculty and staff in a more in-depth way. One, studying that context. Okay? This is what you do when you prepare an educator for a difficult task going out into a battlefield against social inequality. They have to actually know the context, right? Or as activists would say, know your terrain. Or military folks. Any military folks in the room, right? Got to know your terrain. No use in launching a battle if you don't know the terrain. You're gonna lose. Okay. So what's the terrain, right? You want to know the current and historical manifestations of injustice. What are the trends of injustice in a location? What are the current and historical forms of resistance? Because we leave that out. When I always talk to teachers, they're always saying, "Hey, I learned about the community. I studied all that." No, you didn't. You studied poverty. Studying the community and studying poverty aren't the same thing. When you study the community, you study the injustice and you also study the community's assets for resistance. Because then you can mimic those in your work and you can include that work either in reference in your curriculum or in how you operate as a college. Okay? Local and globalized context of struggle, that's a whole other story. I'll get to that another time, maybe later. Okay? Later on today when you come back if you decide to. Okay, and then reflection. How is the institution serving as a sub-oppressor to the community? So it's not just you have these problems out there that impact the students. How are we perpetuating those problems as an institution? Okay? No good in talking about equity if we're not being introspective on how we perpetuate inequity. Right? Which is something that your president was mentioning. Okay? That leads to professional and personal purpose, which I think you guys are already on track on, but institutional culture and operations. For example, a lot of community colleges don't have adequate supervision and support structures to make any changes. How am I going to know that you're being a better teacher when no one comes to your class ever? If you have no department chair that visits your class, how are you going to get coaching on being a better teacher? If you're a classified staff person and no one sees you work with students, how are you going to get better? No one ever watches you deal with a student. So you get to give them the student a frowny face, you can be harsh to them, you can be mean, you can be cold, and everybody just says that's your personality. But you are the primary contact, first contact that a student has, and no one knows what you're doing with the students, yet you're going to provide an equitable atmosphere. It's not going to happen. You don't have the structures in place to do it. I'm not saying you don't. I'm saying in that situation you wouldn't, right? And then practice and pedagogy, right? Do we have a clear idea of what is effective practice here? Or do we just kind of wing it? Do we have ideas on what works and what doesn't? Do we have even discussions about that on a routine basis, even outside of basic skills? All right, so I'm pretty much out of time. So the things we want to consider then are our classroom climates, safety, inclusive participation in classrooms, varied voices being allowed to speak in classrooms without being sent out or escorted out by a county sheriff, shared teaching and learning, awareness of microaggressions. Okay? These are the things we want to work on. Okay? Because the classroom space is where students spend the bulk of their time at community colleges. Not the case at the four-year university. At the community college, the bulk of their time on campus is spent in the classroom. So the classroom is their college experience. Okay? Classified staff, first contact, classroom represents the college experience. If you don't know how to create a safe classroom, then that's going to be their experience. Okay? Culturally relevant pedagogy, you guys will go through that today in the workshop, so we can come back if you have questions about it. These are the 3 tenets of it. Students must experience academic success, they must develop or maintain cultural competence, and they must develop critical consciousness. I'm not going to go through all that. And then lastly, classified staff is really classified educators. A lot of folks see classified staff as separate from faculty in the educational atmosphere. They are different from faculty, but they're also educators. Okay? When we slip and forget that classified staff are educators by nature of their in-depth participation in the educational process, we shortchange ourselves on a good portion of the personnel that influence the campus culture. Okay? And then we undertrain them, we undersupervise them, we underappreciate them. But in reality, they're here too. And they're often here more consistently. So if you're not talking to them and they're not educators, you're missing out, right? So what does that look like? They're critical voices. Classified staff have the perspective of not necessarily being faculty and having contact with other human beings that are not teachers. And they have a perspective that needs to be taken in consideration when critiquing how the university or how the college functions, okay? Key things they want to think about as context, as the primary context, and I'll shut up, is one, classified staff have to be warm. Even if you hate being warm to people. Did nobody ask you that? You got to be warm anyway. Okay? Like, I don't like children, and I work K-12. Like, folks would be like, what? You don't like kids? I would tell them when I was principal, my introducing speech to the school year was like, I don't love you. But your teachers do. Don't forget that. The teacher would be like, yeah, we do. Right? And I'd be like, but I'm a principal, so I don't love you. Okay? I respect your families. And I can respect you, but I don't know you. You ain't lived long enough either, so I don't love you. So there won't be any favoritism or anything because I don't love any of you equally. You know what I mean? And so I don't like kids, but when I'm working with kids, they got to feel that I respect them and care about them somehow, right? And I'm an introvert. I'm speaking to you right now, and I'm an introvert. I don't like talking to people. Right? I'd rather be at home watching Japanese animation right now. Okay? Right now. Okay? All right. Clarity and transparency. Classified staff need to have a standard of clarity and transparency. Clarity in terms of working on how you articulate instructions clearly. Okay? And transparency, meaning telling students the whole process if they ask. So that students can both simultaneously know what's happening but learn from you as an educator. These are the steps that your paperwork's about to go through. These are the steps that you take. Okay, let me tell you how it works here. That's education. They're learning social navigation skills from their classified educators. When you deprive them of that, they can't see you as an educator. They see you as a robot. And then you complain that they don't value you and the university doesn't value. But all that is a group effort to say, wait, we are educators. So we have to act like we're teaching people. Patience. You got to have patience. That's all I got to say. Patience. You're working with people that in America, schools are schools are dangerous places. Ages 12 to 18 are more likely to be victimized on a school campus than in their neighborhood in the United States. Okay, we have just under 900,000 victimizations a year in public schools in America reported, and it's underreported by 80%. People get hurt in schools. Okay, so when they come to see you, you give them bad news or you're cold to them, and they have a response. It ain't got nothing to do with you. Schools can be bad places for people, so you have to be patient. Understand that it's not about you. They don't even know you. Sometimes you're behind a bulletproof glass. They don't know you. They don't even see you. So it's not about you. You have to be patient. Active listening, right? You want to listen to students that come to you. Listen to each other. And this is not just for students. I'm sorry. I keep saying for students. You have to listen to each other. You have to be warm with each other. Yes? Okay? You have to be clear and transparent with each other. Okay? It's the culture of the campus. You build the culture of the whole campus. However you act shifts how the campus feels that day. Okay? So we have to be able to provide spaces and structures for you to be able to do this safely. And then lastly, being the face of the college means an enormous responsibility. I put face of the college because it's largely about your body language. You gotta fix your face. That's what you tell me all the time, because I get mad at people, my face go, and they be like, Darrick, fix your face, it's all bad, okay? You gotta practice in the mirror. Okay? But we need administrative and directors and coordinator support to supervise in a way that's not punitive, right? Supervise in a way that's not punitive. We have conversations about your work on a regular basis that have nothing to do with your overall evaluation, right? Hey, how's it going? We're going to have you and I are going to meet every 2 months and I have this rotation with my staff. So in order to do that, college has to provide space for folks to be able to do those interactions. Because if you have a harsh disposition, and you've had that just your whole life, that's how you are, that means you lack a certain skill you need for your job. That's all. Okay? It doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It doesn't even mean that you're mean. It means you lack a certain skill. And you need to develop that skill. Because in order for folks to be engaged in this place, you have to represent this place as the alternative to the more harmful spaces. And right now, as students told me yesterday, certain students told me that, look, there's some good things here. But one of the things they notice is that they'll say hi to faculty and staff, and the faculty and staff won't say nothing to them as they're walking around campus. They'll be like, hello. Faculty and staff just be like, walk by. And if you're from a historically targeted or low-income community, and I'll shut up, Professor Norris, I'm sorry I went over by like 6 minutes, 7 minutes, I'm sorry. Virgo, I know the whole deal, I'm sorry.
That's funny.
But just in closing, this is actually just a really big deal. Historically targeted working class communities, whether they're immigrant communities, Italian communities, black communities, like it don't matter, okay? Historically in sociology, it goes back to even 1906 and W. Du Bois and the Philadelphia Negro and all these different studies. Poor people actually have higher standards and more boundaries for interaction than privileged people, historically, okay? Because of the necessary reliance upon each other to survive that structure. So if my mama send me to go borrow sugar next door, I need to know how to ask for sugar politely, because we ain't got no sugar. Right? And if I mess up, we won't have sugar. Yes? Okay. All right. So when you're on a campus with folks that are not of high privilege, okay, your relationships become that much more important. Right? And so anyway, I have a lot more to say. We can cover it another time. But the point is that these are the things we want to be mindful of. Classified staff are also educators. We're in a framework in which our work is politicized whether we want it to be or not. We have to think of equity not as diversity, but justice-oriented. And we need structures in place so we can get better in a very safe way, but in a challenging way to provide services in a historically struggling system to get people to complete. Okay, so I'm late. Thank you for letting me finish this part, and thank you all.